Sullivan West didn't usually offer concert tickets to complete strangers. But then again, he'd never had 2 VIP seats go to waste because his brother bailed at the last minute. He stood outside the entrance to the sold-out rooftop concert in downtown Chicago, tapping the edge of the second black envelope against his palm. The skyline sparkled behind him, the summer air pulsing with the bass from the warm-up act. People were already lining up, flashing their passes, buzzing with excitement. "Excuse me," a soft voice said beside him. He turned. She was standing there with a tote bag slung over her shoulder, curls escaping her ponytail, a cup of iced coffee in one hand and a book in the other. She looked out of place in the sea of sequins and designer sunglasses, like she'd taken a wrong turn on her way to a quiet park bench. "Is this the line for general admission?" she asked, eyes flicking toward the velvet rope. He could have just pointed. But instead, Sullivan blurted, "What are you doing tonight?" She blinked. Reading." He held up the spare ticket. "I've got an extra VIP pass to the show. Front row, open bar, private terrace. You interested?" She narrowed her eyes. "Are you serious?" "Very." "Why me?" Sullivan didn't have a good answer. Maybe it was the way she didn't fake a smile like most people did when they recognized him, or the fact that she looked like she genuinely didn't care about the band, the VIP section, or who he was. That was rare. "You look like you could use a little loud music and free champagne," he said. She studied him for a second longer, then tucked her book into her bag. "I'm Calla O'Reilly," she said, extending her hand. He shook it. "Sullivan West." Her eyes widened slightly as the name clicked. "Wait. The Sullivan West. West Tech, the guy who, yeah," he said quickly, already handing her the ticket. "But tonight, I'm just a guy who hates wasting a good seat." They walked past the line together, flashing their passes at the security guard who waved them through without a glance. Inside, the terrace was breathtaking glass walls, plush seating, strings of golden lights overhead. A waiter brought them champagne flutes within seconds. The stage was only a few feet away. Calla looked around, impressed but trying not to show it. "This is casual for you?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Pretty much," he said with a shrug. "You?" She laughed. "I teach 6th grade English and live in a 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery. This is not my usual Tuesday." He liked her already. "I can't believe you just handed me a $1,000 ticket," she said, sipping her champagne. He leaned closer. "Don't tell anyone, but the resale value's even higher." They laughed, and it was too easy. Calla wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't pretending to know the band. She didn't care about the elite crowd around them, and Sullivan felt more relaxed than he had in weeks. Halfway through the concert, when the band played a slow acoustic number, Calla leaned on the railing, the city lights reflecting in her glass. He glanced at her. "You all right?" She turned toward him. "Yeah, just thinking. This is one of those weird moments you don't expect. Like I was just walking home and now I'm here, with a millionaire I just met, drinking champagne. Listening to one of the biggest bands in the world. You forgot the part where I didn't ask you any creepy questions," he teased. She smiled. "True, you're surprisingly normal," he laughed. "I get that a lot." Usually with a shocked tone. For the rest of the night, they talked between songs, about everything and nothing: how she grew up in Michigan, how he started coding at age 13, how she once got banned from a karaoke bar, how he once almost bought a yacht just because he was bored. When the show ended, the crowd slowly filtered out, but neither of them moved. "I didn't expect to have this much fun," she said, adjusting her bag. "I thought I'd be awkward the whole time and sneak out halfway through." "You still can," he offered. "But I'd hate to end the night here." She looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't just some rich guy with a spare ticket. She could see it now, the way he leaned in when she spoke, the way he remembered little things she said. The way he wasn't trying to impress her with money, but with his time. "I could go for dessert," she said. He grinned. "I know a place." They walked through the city together, the night warm and humming with energy. He took her to a 24-hour patisserie that didn't even have a sign out front, just a gold bell on the door. She ordered a raspberry tart. He got 2. When they sat down at the marble counter, he said, "So, Calla O'Reilly, you always say yes to strange men with concert tickets." "No," she said, "but something told me you weren't dangerous." "Not even a little," he teased. "Maybe," she said, licking a bit of cream off her finger, "but I think I could take you." They sat there until almost 2 in the morning, talking and laughing like old friends who'd just met. When he walked her to her place, she stopped on the steps. "I had a really good time," she said. "Me too," she hesitated, then leaned up and kissed him on the cheek. "Thanks for inviting me," he nodded, eyes not leaving hers. "Calla?" "Yeah. Would you want to do this again? Not the concert, just dinner or something," she smiled. "I'd like that." And as he walked away, Sullivan realized something that made him stop in the middle of the sidewalk, his heart doing something it hadn't done in a long time. He didn't want to wait a few days to call her. He wanted to see her again, as soon as possible. Because somehow, in the span of one night, Calla O'Reilly had done something he never saw coming. She'd gotten under his skin. Calla didn't expect to see Sullivan again so soon. She had barely made it past the front steps of the school before she spotted him leaning against the hood of a dark blue car that looked like it had been flown in from the future. He was dressed in a charcoal wool coat and a steel gray sweater, the collar of a pressed shirt just visible beneath it. His hands were tucked into his pockets, and he was watching the school doors like he was waiting for something or someone. She stopped short, blinking against the early morning sun. "What are you doing here?" He pushed off the car. "I figured since I interrupted your Tuesday night, I should return the favor and ruin your Wednesday morning." She laughed despite herself. "You're a little too well dressed to be loitering outside a middle school." "I brought coffee," he said, holding up a tray with 2 cups and a small white bag. "And a peace offering, raspberry croissant." Calla glanced around at the parents and kids filing in. "You realize I have to go teach a room full of 11-year-olds in approximately 3 minutes. I know, I just couldn't wait until Friday," she squinted. "Friday, our dinner." "You said yes." "I remember," she said, her voice softening. "You just surprised me. Is it a bad surprise?" She shook her head. "No, just unexpected." "I'll take unexpected," he said, handing her the croissant. "I'll let you get to it." "Just wanted to say good morning." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "You're really not used to waiting, are you?" He grinned at her over his shoulder. "Not when I know what I want." Calla spent the rest of the day trying to focus on sentence diagrams and mythology units, but her mind kept drifting back to the man with the coffee and the croissant. It wasn't just the gesture, it was the timing, the way he didn't wait for convenience. The way he showed up. By the time Friday rolled around, she was more nervous than she wanted to admit. She'd borrowed a dress from her neighbor, pulled her hair half up, and stood in front of her mirror for almost 10 minutes debating whether to wear lipstick. In the end, she decided on clear gloss and a single gold bangle. When she stepped outside, a sleek black town car was already waiting at the curb. A driver got out and opened the door before she could say a word. Sullivan was inside, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up and smiled as she slid in. "You clean up all right," he said. "I had help," she replied. "My neighbor practically staged a makeover intervention." "You didn't need it." The restaurant was tucked inside a high rise on the river floor to ceiling windows, candlelight, and a view of the city skyline that made her breath catch. The hostess led them to a private table near the glass, and within seconds, a server appeared with a wine list bound in navy leather. "I didn't know this place existed," Calla said, glancing around. "It's new, quiet, hard to get into. And yet here we are." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her for a moment, like he was memorizing the way the candlelight hit her cheekbone. "You make things feel easier than they should," he finally said. She raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "I've had a lot of dinners like this." "But not with someone who asks real questions. You say that like it's rare." "It is." Their food arrived, her salmon served over a bed of wild rice, his steak cut into perfect slices. They ate slowly, talking between bites. "So what made you walk up to me that night?" she asked, cutting into a piece of asparagus. I'm not sure, he admitted. You looked like you didn't belong, but also like you didn't care. That kind of confidence is hard to fake. I wasn't confident, she said. I was tired. And annoyed at myself for leaving my headphones at home, he smiled. Still, you said yes. I did. And you haven't run yet. Yet, she echoed, tilting her head. Is that what usually happens? He set his fork down. Eventually. Either they want something I can't give or they think I'm someone I'm not. And who are you? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? They sat in silence for a moment, the city glittering below them. Do you ever get tired of it? She asked. The money, the attention. The assumptions. Yes, he said quietly, but I've never really known anything else. Must be nice. Not always. She leaned back, watching him. You don't talk like someone who has it all. Maybe because I don't. After dinner, he led her out onto a small rooftop garden lit by lanterns strung between planters. The air was cool but not cold, and the city hummed below them. I used to think I needed someone who understood this world, he said, tucking his hands into his coat pockets. But lately, I think I need someone who doesn't care about it. Calla stepped closer to the edge, her voice low. I don't understand it. Not even a little. Good, he said, moving beside her. That's why I'm still here. She turned to face him. You barely know me. I know enough to want to. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked out at the skyline, her expression unreadable. People always say that in the beginning, she said. But wanting someone and knowing how to stay with them are two different things. You're not wrong. Then why do you keep showing up? He looked at her then, really looked. Because when I'm with you, he said, I forget about everything else, and that doesn't happen to me. Ever. She didn't kiss him, but she didn't pull away when his fingers brushed hers either. And when he walked her to her door a half hour later, she turned toward him with a look that was equal parts curiosity and warning. This isn't going to be easy, she said. I'm not looking for easy, he replied. She gave him one last glance before stepping inside. Good. Because I don't do simple. As the door closed behind her, Sullivan stood there for a long moment, the night pressing in around him. He wasn't sure what had shifted, but something had. And for the first time in a long while, he wanted to see where it would go. Calla stepped into the atrium of the Art Institute 10 minutes early, her boots echoing softly on the marble floor. She hadn't been here in years. Too many field trips with sugar-high kids had dulled the magic, but tonight everything felt different. The museum was quiet, closed to the public, and flooded with warm amber lighting that made the centuries-old paintings seem alive. She spotted Sullivan near the Impressionist wing, hands clasped behind his back as he studied a Monet. He wore a navy dress shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to reveal a leather-strapped watch, and he looked completely at ease, like he belonged here after hours, like the art had been waiting for him. You didn't mention we'd have a private museum, she said, joining him. I called in a favor, he replied. Thought you might enjoy a little quiet. This is more than quiet, she said, glancing around. This is practically sacred. He smiled, but not in a way that tried to impress her. What's your favorite painting? I don't know if I have one anymore, she admitted. When I was a kid, I used to pretend the people in the portraits were frozen mid-conversation. I'd try to guess what they were saying. He looked at her like she'd just handed him a secret. And now I try not to look too long, she said softly. It reminds me how much time has passed. They moved through the galleries slowly, pausing at sculptures and tapestries, their footsteps the only sound. When they reached a small room filled with Dutch still lifes, she stopped in front of a painting of overripe fruit and a cracked goblet. This one always bothered me, she said, because it's realistic. Because it's honest, she replied. Everything's decaying. No one paints that unless they're trying to say something. He studied the painting a moment, then turned to her. What are you trying not to say? She didn't answer right away. I've been on my own for a long time, she said finally. Not in the dramatic way, just I make my own decisions. Pay my own bills, handle my own messes, I don't let people in easily. I've noticed. And I don't like being someone's project, she added, her gaze steady. I'm not broken, I don't need fixing. I don't see you that way, he said. I just want to know you, that's the thing, she said. Most people think they want to know me until they find out how complicated I am. He stepped closer, his voice low. I don't scare easy. She tilted her head, considering him. You say that now. They left the museum just as the sky turned indigo, the city softening into twilight. Outside, his driver waited with the car, but Calla hesitated at the curb. Are you hungry? She asked. Always. Good, she said, because I know a place. She led him 3 blocks south to a narrow door wedged between a used bookshop and a tailor's storefront. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of garlic and red wine, and the tables were covered in checkered cloths faded from age. The owner greeted her by name and pointed them to a booth near the back. You come here often? Sullivan asked as they sat down. Every Friday growing up, she said. My dad used to bring me here after swim meets. He glanced around at the walls covered in yellowing photos and mismatched frames. It's got character. They've got a house red that's better than anything you can find for $100, she said, but you've got to drink it with the lasagna. Non-negotiable, he raised his glass. I like a woman with rules. As the night stretched on, the conversation shifted. They talked about their worst decisions. She once cut her own bangs the day before high school pictures. He invested in a crypto startup that vanished overnight. They traded stories about childhood holidays, odd jobs, and the worst advice they'd ever followed. You really painted houses in college? He asked, incredulous. For 2 summers. I wasn't great at it. I once fell off a ladder and landed in a rose bush. Okay, that's impressive. You're just saying that because you've never used a paint roller in your life. I hired someone to paint my first apartment, he admitted. But I did assemble my own bookshelves. Oh, a true man of the people, she teased. He reached across the table, brushing his thumb lightly across her knuckles. Calla, her laughter faded. Yeah, I like you. She drew in a breath, the moment stretching between them. I like you too, she said, her voice quieter now. That's the problem. Why? Because this. She gestured between them, feels like it's moving fast, and fast usually burns out. This doesn't feel like burning, he said. It feels like something I've been missing. Her eyes flicked away, then returned to his. I'm not used to being the one who gets chosen. You weren't chosen, he said. You were found. She didn't answer, but something in her gaze shifted, softened. They left the restaurant just before midnight, the streets quiet and slick with the sheen of a passing rain. He offered her his arm and she took it without hesitation. Outside her apartment, she turned to him. So what happens now? He touched her cheek, his hand warm against the cool air. Now I stop pretending I'm not already in trouble. For what? For wanting more. She leaned into his touch, her voice a whisper. Then you're not the only one. Sullivan didn't kiss her, not yet. Instead, he turned and walked back to the car with the weight of something dangerous blooming in his chest. Because this wasn't infatuation, and it wasn't casual. It was the beginning of something real. And real was always the most terrifying thing of all. The first snow of the season fell silently over the city, blanketing the rooftops and softening the harsh angles of the skyline. Calla stood by the window of Sullivan's penthouse, cradling a mug of tea as the lights of downtown flickered below. She hadn't meant to stay this late, not on a school night, but the hours had slipped past unnoticed, wrapped in conversation and quiet music, and the kind of comfort she didn't realize she'd been missing. Sullivan emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a cloth. You'll miss the last train if you don't leave soon. She didn't turn. I know. He crossed the room and leaned on the edge of the window beside her. Or you could stay. She glanced at him. That's not a small ask. I'm not asking lightly. There was no pressure in his tone, just quiet sincerity. She turned to face him fully, setting her cup on the windowsill. You've never asked me what I want, she said. I figured you'd tell me if you were ready. I think I am, she said. But I want to be sure you're not just drawn to the idea of me, to the novelty. He stepped closer. This isn't novelty, it's clarity. She searched his face. Then tell me something true, something nobody else knows. He didn't hesitate. I almost left West Tech last year. I had an offer to buy me out, clean exit, no strings. I wrote the resignation letter, had the wire transfer drafted, but I couldn't go through with it. Why not? Because I built it. And walking away felt like erasing a part of myself. She nodded, absorbing his words. I get that. Your turn, he said. She took a breath. I lost my mom in my second year of college. I didn't take time off. I went to class the next morning. I think I was afraid that if I stopped moving, I'd never start again. Sullivan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You don't have to keep moving all the time anymore. She rested her forehead lightly against his shoulder. I don't know how to slow down. Then let me show you, he said quietly. The next morning, she woke up to the scent of fresh bread and the faintest sound of jazz playing from the kitchen. She followed it barefoot, finding him plating 2 dishes with the precision of someone who didn't cook often but was determined to do it right. You're not bad at this, she said, sliding onto a stool at the marble island. I watched 5 videos, he said. Don't expect a repeat performance without significant applause. She tasted the eggs. You might have just bought yourself another date. He leaned on his elbows, watching her. That's what I was hoping for. Later that week, she invited him to the school's winter reading showcase. It's chaos, she warned. There will be glitter, possibly tears, definitely cookies with too much frosting. He showed up 5 minutes early, carrying a box of blank journals with leather bindings and a note for each student inside. Your story matters. Keep writing it. Calla blinked down at the stack. You didn't have to, I wanted to, he said. The kids adored him immediately, especially when he crouched down to listen to a shy boy read a poem about his dog. Calla watched from across the room, something tight and unfamiliar twisting in her chest. It wasn't just that Sullivan fit in, it was that he never tried to stand out. He waited until the last child left before walking over to her. I meant what I wrote in those notes. She nodded, her voice quiet. I know. As the holidays approached, their lives began to tangle in small but meaningful ways. She began leaving a toothbrush at his place. He started stocking her favorite tea. One Saturday, they spent the morning painting a wall in her apartment, a moody navy that made the room feel like dusk even at noon. He didn't complain when the paint got in his hair. She didn't comment when he stayed the entire weekend without checking his phone once. But not everything was seamless. One afternoon, she found a glossy invitation tucked between a stack of his mail. It was for a gala, his company's annual winter fundraiser, black tie, press heavy. She traced the embossed lettering with her finger. You didn't mention this, she said when he walked in. I wasn't sure you'd want to go. Why wouldn't I? Because it's not your world, she set the card down. I thought we were building a shared one. His shoulders tightened. You're right, that was unfair. She stepped closer. I want to be there for all of it, not just the quiet nights. Not just the dinners and the bookstores. The messy parts, the high-pressure parts, the parts that scare you. He met her gaze. Then be warned. That night is a minefield. Then let's walk it together. The gala was held in a glass-walled ballroom overlooking the frozen lake. She wore a midnight blue gown with sleeves that fluttered like wings and a pair of heels she hadn't touched in years. Sullivan met her at the bottom of the hotel stairs, his tux crisp, his expression unreadable. Hi, she said. He exhaled. You look like trouble. She smiled. You're not wrong. Inside, the room buzzed with wealth and expectation. Flashbulbs popped. Executives circled like sharks. Sullivan introduced her as Calla without any qualifiers. Not a date, not a friend. Just her name, said with a kind of reverence that made her spine straighten. They made it an hour before the first slip. A woman with 2 white teeth and a voice like brittle glass leaned in. She's lovely, Sully. Very grounded. Is she with one of the nonprofits? No, he said evenly. She's with me. Calla excused herself, stepping out onto the terrace for air. The snow had started again, fine and silver in the darkness. She wrapped her arms around herself. Sullivan joined her a moment later. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, she said, but I didn't realize how invisible I'd feel next to all of this. He reached for her. "You're not invisible," she met his eyes. "Then prove it." Without a word, he turned and opened the terrace doors wider. The room hushed as he stepped back in, his voice carrying over the music. "Excuse me," he said. "I just wanted to take a second to thank someone." All eyes turned. "She's not a donor," he said. "She's not on a board, she doesn't run a company, but she teaches 30 kids how to care about language. She listens harder than anyone I've ever met. And she thinks glitter glue is an acceptable medium for poetry. She's the smartest person in this room." "And I'm incredibly lucky she said yes to me." He held out his hand. Calla stepped inside, all the cameras turned toward them as she crossed the floor. But in that moment, she didn't care. She took his hand. And just like that, the world realigned. Later, back in his penthouse, she stood by the window again, watching the snow fall over the city. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said against her temple, "we stop pretending there's any going back from this." She turned in his arms. "I don't want to." He kissed her then, soft and sure and long overdue, and when he pulled back, he whispered, "You captured my heart the second you looked at me like I wasn't a headline." She smiled, her voice barely audible. "You gave me a life I never thought I could want." They stood together in the silence, the city glittering below them, the future unfolding in quiet, certain symmetry. There were no promises made, but they didn't need to be, they already knew. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Sullivan's penthouse, casting soft gold across the hardwood floors. Calla stood barefoot in the kitchen, tying her hair into a loose knot as she flipped through the handwritten note left beside a steaming cup of her favorite ginger tea. The scent of citrus and mint wafted upward, grounding her in the quiet stillness of a place that had quickly begun to feel like home. She read the note again, just a few hours at the office. "Don't make plans tonight. Dress warm. Trust me." As Calla smiled to herself, folding the note neatly and tucking it into the pocket of her robe. She glanced around the open space, her eyes landing on a sketchbook she hadn't noticed before, left open on the corner of the coffee table. Curious, she patted over and picked it up. Inside were pencil renderings, soft, detailed sketches of places they'd been together. The rooftop terrace where they first met, the tiny Italian restaurant with the checkered tablecloths, a park bench beneath a canopy of trees where they'd once sat and shared pastries after a long walk. On the final page was something different, a sketch of her sitting cross-legged on his couch, reading, her face turned slightly to the window, unaware of being watched. The likeness was startling, intimate, and deeply personal. She ran a finger along the edge of the page, her heart thudding. She hadn't known he drew. When Sullivan returned that afternoon, he found her curled up on the couch with the sketchbook on her lap. "You didn't tell me you could do this," she said without looking up. "I don't show it to anyone," he said, setting his keys down. "It's just for me." "Not anymore," she murmured, carefully closing the book. "You captured something I didn't even know I was giving." He stepped forward, brushing a curl behind her ear. "I see you. That's all I've ever wanted to do." She looked up at him. "Then what are we doing tonight?" He reached into his coat pocket and held out a small envelope. Inside was a single train ticket. One way. She stared at it. "Where are we going?" "Someplace I've never taken anyone before." An hour later, bundled in coats and scarves, they boarded a sleek private train car that glided quietly out of the city. Calla pressed her nose to the window as the skyline receded, replaced by snowy woods and open land. Sullivan poured 2 glasses of red wine and handed her one. "You're being very mysterious," she said, eyeing him. "I've learned that you like surprises. Only the good kind." He leaned back, watching her over the rim of his glass. "I promise, this is the very best kind." The train slowed just as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon. They disembarked at a small private station where a black SUV waited. Calla glanced at him as he opened the door. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" He held her gaze. "Not when it matters." They drove for 15 minutes through a narrow road that wound between tall pines. Then the trees parted, and a sprawling glass and timber lodge came into view, nestled at the edge of a frozen lake. Smoke curled from the chimney and soft lights glowed from the windows like stars. Calla stepped out of the car slowly, breath visible in the cold air. "This is yours?" she asked. Sullivan nodded. "I built it 3 years ago. I haven't been back since my father passed." She turned to him, sensing the weight behind the words. "Why now?" "Because you've reminded me what it feels like to be somewhere that holds meaning," he said. "And I want you to see the parts of me that don't make the headlines." Inside, the lodge was warm and quiet, filled with worn leather chairs, stacked firewood, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the lake. A fire crackled in the hearth. He led her upstairs to a loft framed with cedar beams, where a soft wool blanket and a tray of hot cider waited. Sullivan took her hand and pulled her gently toward the window seat. "I brought you here because I needed you to see where my story started," he said. "This was the first place I ever dreamed big. The first place I ever sat down and mapped out what became West Tech. My dad used to sit right here and tell me that building something took more than brains. It took heart." Calla reached for his hand. "He'd be proud of what you built. I think he'd be prouder that I finally stopped running long enough to find someone real." He reached into his coat pocket again, this time pulling out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I never believed in fate," he said, voice low, "but I believe in you. I believe in us, and I don't want another day to go by without making that perfectly clear." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, a Marquise diamond set in a band of twisted gold, almost organic in its design. Unique, thoughtful, timeless. Calla stared at it, then back at him. "I had no idea you were planning this," she whispered. "I wasn't, until I met you, and then I couldn't imagine anything else." She blinked fast, her heart full to bursting. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She didn't need to think. "Yes." Sullivan's smile stretched wide as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious he was afraid to drop. Outside, the snow fell in soft spirals, the sky turning lavender with night. Inside, everything was warmth and light and the quiet hum of two people who had finally found their way to each other. 6 months later, they married in the garden behind the lodge, surrounded by wildflowers and a small circle of people they both trusted. Calla wore a simple dress with embroidered leaves at the hem and a crown of baby's breath in her curls. Sullivan wore a gray suit with no tie, his hands steady as he promised her forever. He read his vows from a folded page torn from the same sketchbook she'd found that morning in his penthouse. She read hers from the back of an old lesson plan. They danced beneath strings of golden lights, barefoot on the grass as dusk settled over the lake. Afterward, they returned to the city, not as two people from different worlds, but as one. Calla kept teaching, but now her students wrote essays about tech innovation alongside poetry. Sullivan stepped back from the day-to-day operations of West Tech, using his time to fund literacy programs and art initiatives in public schools. They bought a brownstone near the river with creaky floors and a sunroom that caught the light just right. On weekends, she read to him as he sketched, and sometimes they'd take the train out to the lodge, walking the frozen lake and talking about everything they hadn't yet built. They didn't move fast after that. They didn't need to. They had already found everything they didn't know they were looking for, and they lived fully and completely in love with no apologies, no masks, and no looking back.